Okay, so for the next part, we're going to zRemesh all of our individual parts, so our mesh in general is relatively similar. Then we're going to save, merge all of our layers together, and remesh by union. This will weld everything together. And then finally, once we have this nice new mesh that's welded together, we're going to zRemesh it one more time just to clean it up a little bit. We're going to reproject any details that we lost. So this was something I touched on a little bit about projecting details. It's a little tricky, but if you follow along, you'll be fine. And then we're going to save both versions and upload to Blackboard. So this video is a little slower than all of the rest, but I think it will be helpful, and feel free to speed it up in YouTube if you would like to go faster. Okay. And again, I'm going to do a file and a save project because I've been doing my project files before Remesh. And I'm also going to save after Remesh. Oops. And so now I know I have a before and an after, just in case something goes horribly wrong here. Okay, so we're going to turn back on our polyframe, and I have slowed this right down so that we can, you can follow along. And basically what I need to do is mesh my head, my neck, my body, and my legs all together, and my hands. I want to make sure when I'm doing that my meshes are roughly the same sizes. Oops, Manzi. That I don't have anything too weird going on with my geometry before I zRemesh it together. So you can already see that my feet have some weird issues because I added the heel late. The arms look pretty good. The body looks pretty good. Everything's relatively similar. And then again, the head, there's definitely some differences in mesh size here. So the big head has a lot less squares than the neck. So we'll definitely need to modify that. So let's take a look one more time at our model and make sure that everything's making sense. My back, I'm not gonna lie, is pretty wonky. I'm not super happy with it. So you know what, I'm just gonna smooth a couple things down. I'm gonna speed this up a tiny bit. Basically, if you have these really hard edges where things are not flowing together well, then this blockout's not gonna mesh together well when you actually combine the layers. So it's a good idea to either just smooth out those rough edges or just get rid of those pieces, and we can always add them on later. Okay, so I'm just making sure all of my geometry is flowing together. It looks pretty good. The scapula is still pretty weird. If your scapula look like that, maybe take a little more time to smooth them out. I think I'm even going to auto group these just so I can make sure that they are going to be combining with each other. Basically, when we hit this remesh by union button later, we're going to want to make sure that everything is actually connected. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to save one more time because I did make some changes. That looks better. Okay. I'm also just going to square off her shoulders a little bit. So one more time with the ribs, I am going to do a geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. And then just smooth away some of this weirdness. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're basically trying to make all of our layers have roughly the same polyframes all over. So when we merge these pieces together, there's nothing stretched, there's no weirdness in our different groups. So let's go to our head and neck first. This is also a great time to save because now we're going to be, so let's say with layers before zRemeshed. Okay. And so now we're going to go down to geometry, zRemeshed. And for our face, currently our total points in our model is about 35,000. That's a little on the high side. Our face has 5,300. I'm thinking for zRemeshed, we want to turn on keep group. Smooth groups is okay, because that will kind of help us a little bit. And I'm thinking target polygon count of 1.8, let's go for 2. And let's hit zRemeshed. Okay, so that's not too bad. Quite a few polygons here. Active points 4,000. I think we can do better. I think we could do like a 1.5 and click zRemeshed. Okay, now we're down to 3,300. So I think that's looking pretty good still, and I'm liking this. So we're going to go to our next layer. So go down to your ribs. And for this, we are going to go back to geometry and zRemeshed. And I'm thinking for this, we probably want something a little higher, like maybe 4. Let's try that. That's better. So our active points haven't, our total points haven't gone up too much, and we've still got some nice detail. If I turn off my polyframe, I think my detail is still pretty good. So let's stick with that. But you're welcome to try it a couple times just to make sure that your poly group or polys are roughly the same. Okay, so for arms, again, we have a little bit of stretching here, so let's try our zRemeshed. So that's under geometry, zRemeshed. And if you guys want, you can always put these buttons on the bottom down here. I'm going to keep groups, target polygon count. I don't think we need to be at 5. Let's try 2. That's pretty good. Pretty happy with these. Okay, next one, legs. For the legs, I did fix one thing in the back here, so I'm going to go to geometry, zRemeshed, keep groups, target polygon count, I'm guessing 2. That's fine. You can always turn off the polys just to make sure you're keeping some of this detail. Yep, looking nice and sharp. You know what, we might as well do our hands. The important thing with hands and zRemeshing is that all of your fingers are far enough spaced apart so that when we're zRemeshing them, they maintain their integrity and don't get mushed together. So again, zRemeshed, keep group. Let's try this 0.9 and see what happens. All right, that was a little weird. There's some, it introduced new groups, which I didn't think it was supposed to do. Let's see if we can up our target polygon count. There we go. That's better. So 1.8 seemed to work fine for me, but for you it could be different. All right, so now save one more time. Let's call this. And if, as long as we're saving with layers with layers after individual remesh. Cool. And I would say in general, we want to keep this, or this is a really good base mesh that you could use if you're having a similar character in the future. So that's why we save this. Okay, so next we are going to merge everything except for the eyes. We're going to go to merge. We're going to merge down, but before we do that, we're going to turn off weld. So merge down, hit OK. That worked. Everything's looking pretty good. So we're going to merge down again. Hit OK. Make sure weld is off. Next, merge down and hit OK. Awesome. Again, looking good. Okay, so for our last piece, we want to merge the hands. Before I do that, I want you to notice that I have about 11,000 active points right now for the hands. I have about 25,000 for the body. I'm just going to double check under my geometry to make sure that dynamic subdivision is off for the body, and let's double check that it is off for the hands. Yes. Okay, and now I can merge and make sure weld is off and merge down. So now I have 37,000 points and I am really good. And this is a great point to save this model. So basically this is a nice clean base mesh that is very medium to low resolution, but looks good with dynamic subdivisions turned on. And this would be a great mesh for you to use in the future for your final if you want to create a character that's got a similar setup. So let's just call this character Blockout Final Base Mesh. Okay. And so from here, so we can rename this layer. Let's just call this merged. And I'm going to duplicate this layer. And basically at this point, what we want to do is get rid of, What we want to do is get rid of all the interior geometry so that any place that is overlapping right now will be gone. So this is what we've been working towards. Oops. There we go. So you can see if I hide little pieces, it hasn't actually been remeshed just yet, or the interior pieces haven't been deleted just yet. So there are a couple ways that we can do that. The more traditional way of doing that is called Dynamesh. And what Dynamesh does is it has an algorithm where I believe it just like envelops your model in polygons. And the way that it has the algorithm is very good for capturing detail, but it's not very good for topology. So let's call this merged one instead. Let's rename this and call this Dynamesh. So we can all see what Dynamesh looks like. So before we Dynamesh, in our geometry, I want you to go to Dynamic Subdivisions, see this nice smooth model, and hit Apply. What this is going to do is give us a lot more active points, so like 600,000, but that's okay. And then we're just going to delete lower. And this is fine because I have our nice low resolution version down here, and now is our high resolution Dynamesh. And then we're going to go to geometry and we're actually going to Dynamesh. So here's Dynamesh. It's one of the menus under geometry. And a few things that you can see for the options. Nothing actually happens until you hit the Dynamesh button. You can choose to keep groups, which we're going to do. You can apply a clay polish. I think this just kind of smooths everything out. You can reproject your Dynamesh. We're going to actually manually reproject later on, so we can ignore that. And then there's a blur, which adds a little bit of smoothness. I usually leave that on by default. And then our resolution. So default is 128. So let's just leave it at that and hit Dynamesh. Well, first of all, let's see. Right now, because we applied our dynamic subdivisions, we've got quite a lot of geometry going on. Just to see how that looks. But let's see how it looks after we Dynamesh. Mask must be cleared. So you'll see all these notes up here. Now when I Dynamesh, so it did make some changes. We're still at 600,000 points. But you can see the quality of the polygons is not as good as before. We'll see lots of like triangles kind of mixed in. There's no n-gons, but it's just not quite as nice. However, if you turn off your geometry there, you can see that this is actually still a good looking, nice, clean, high quality mesh. So this is great to keep, and let's do that now. So we're going to let's make a folder. Basically, in our subtool options over here, so we got delete, duplicate, rename. There's also an option for folders. So let's create a folder that says like keep. And now our Dynamesh is in it. And you can click and drag and drop. And it's a good place to keep all of our different options. Okay, so now let's go back to our merged layer. Our Dynamesh layer still has its eyeball turned on, so we can turn that off. And let's just turn off everything in this folder. Okay, so now let's do option 2. Option 2 is remesh by union. And I am going to turn back on my subdivisions, dynamic subdivisions. And we are going to grab our move, scale, rotate gizmo. And you need the actual gizmo rather than the transpose line for this. Now we need to also center our gizmo. So I'm going to unlock it, reset the orientation, and then I'm going to go to the unmasked mesh center. Now, if your gizmo goes to the actual center of your mesh, you're in good shape. If you had symmetry turned on, which is always a good thing, you can see now I had symmetry turned on and I clicked the little location button here, my gizmo would be off to the right. So I don't want that in this case. So turn off symmetry, click on go to the center, make sure your rotation's good, and lock. And now we want to go to this tiny little settings icon on the left hand side here and click on that and go to remesh by union. So as we're doing this, I just want to kind of clarify the difference between Dynamesh and remesh by union. So Dynamesh envelops the exterior of the mesh in polygons, deletes the interior geometry, welds the pieces together. It's not the best topology, but it's great at capturing detail. In contrast, remesh by union uses the existing topology and just welds those pieces together as best it can. It deletes the interior geometry as well, but the joins are not always as clean as in Dynamesh, but you overall get a nicer topology. So we're going to be using both. And so what these settings are a bunch of different deformers that you can use. There's like remesh by decimation, subdivide, bend curve, inflate. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Remesh by zRemeshed and remesh by union. And this is the one we're going to pick right now. So let's select this. It's going to think a little bit and bam. Oh, you know what? Did I make a backup of this? Sorry. Let's go back. I'm going to go back one and just make a duplicate layer and rename this. Sorry. Remesh by union. Just so I can keep all of these straight. Okay, so now go back to my gear, remesh by union, and I am in good shape. So my merged layer still has that where I press Control Shift and you can see I still have like the full mesh underneath. My remesh by union, if I click, it's actually cut away all of the interior pieces. And so that is a great stopping point for this video. I'm sorry that this takes so long. Oops. Undo that. I'll shift click. But now we have a remesh by union. It has 28,000 active points on it. Looking at the topology, looks pretty good. And we will work to make this a little nicer in the next video. So let's move along to the next video and save.